This story is usually told as a warning about arrogance. But that interpretation is too convenient, because the most unsettling detail is not that humans tried to reach the heavens. It's that, for a brief moment, they succeeded at something far more dangerous. They agreed. The story begins after catastrophe, after the flood, after survival has already filtered humanity once. What remains is not chaos, it is coordination, a single population, a single language, a shared memory of extinction. And from that memory emerges a quiet, terrifying conclusion: never again. The text is explicit about this unity: one people, one speech, no friction, no misunderstanding, no internal resistance. And from that unanimity, an idea forms, not a prayer, not a question, a plan. Let us build a city. Let us make a name for ourselves. This is not rebellion in the emotional sense. It is administration. The materials matter. They do not use stone. They manufacture brick, standardized, repeatable, replaceable. This is not mythic ambition. This is industrial thinking. And the tower is not described as a ladder to the divine. It is a symbol of permanence, a vertical declaration that says, we will not be scattered again. Most people miss this. The tower is not about reaching God. It is about resisting uncertainty, about locking the future into a single shape. Because when everyone speaks the same language, when everyone agrees on the same goal, when everyone moves in the same direction, nothing feels more powerful or more fragile. The story has not introduced sin yet. No violence, no deception, no crime, only coordination. And that is precisely what makes what comes next so disturbing. Because the intervention does not come after failure, it comes at the peak of success, before the tower is finished, before the system collapses on its own, as if the danger was never the height of the structure, but the stability of the agreement beneath it. The interruption is brief, almost casual. No fire, no flood, no dramatic destruction, just confusion. The text does not say the tower falls. It does not say the city burns. It says something far more precise. Language fractures, and with it, coordination collapses. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because nothing immoral is named. No commandment is broken. No victim is mentioned. The project is halted not because it is cruel, but because it is effective. Nothing they plan will be impossible for them. That is the justification. Read it carefully. The concern is not what they have done. It is what they might do next. A system that works too well. Think about what language actually does. It aligns perception. It standardizes meaning. It compresses complexity into shared symbols. When everyone uses the same words the same way, disagreement becomes inefficient. Resistance becomes noise. And once language becomes perfectly aligned, power no longer needs force. It only needs consensus. This is why the response is surgical, not destruction of tools, not elimination of leaders, just semantic instability. Words stop landing where they used to, instructions misfire, intentions fracture. The system cannot correct itself because the system no longer understands itself. This is not punishment in the emotional sense, it is containment. As if the narrative is suggesting that unlimited coordination is more dangerous than open conflict. That misunderstanding, however painful, is safer than total agreement. Notice what is never explained. There is no discussion, no negotiation. The builders are not warned. The project simply dissolves from the inside. And the people scatter, not because they are chased, but because they can no longer synchronize. The tower is abandoned, not as a ruin of hubris, but as a monument to something that almost worked. And the story moves on. No resolution, no apology, just fragmentation. As if to say, there are some structures humanity is not allowed to finish, not because they are evil, but because they are too stable to be reversed once completed. This pattern did not stay in ancient Mesopotamia. It reappears whenever unity becomes the highest value. Every time a society decides that disagreement is inefficient, that ambiguity is a flaw, that friction must be eliminated, the tower begins again. Modern systems do not build with brick. They build with data, with protocols, with metrics. But the logic is identical. One language, one framework, one acceptable interpretation of reality. When institutions talk about alignment, They are rarely talking about understanding. They are talking about predictability, because predictable people are easier to manage than complex ones. The Babel story does not condemn ambition. It warns about convergence, about the moment when difference becomes intolerable, when the goal is no longer truth, but uniform execution. Look at how quickly modern systems break when language shifts. A term changes meaning. A word is redefined. A label becomes unstable. Suddenly, coordination falters. Projects stall. Institutions panic. Not because reality changed, but because agreement did. And notice how often power responds the same way. Not by debating, but by enforcing definitions, by narrowing acceptable speech, by trying to rebuild the tower faster, higher, stronger, more centralized. The ancient story suggests that this instinct is self-defeating, because total coherence is brittle, it cannot adapt, it cannot absorb anomaly, and when it fails everywhere at once. Fragmentation feels like weakness, but fragmentation localizes damage. Misunderstanding slows progress, but it also prevents irreversible mistakes. This is the uncomfortable suggestion at the heart of the narrative, that confusion may be a form of protection, that disagreement is not a bug, but a break, and that a world where everyone agrees might be far more dangerous than a world where no one fully understands each other. The story ends without closure, no reconciliation, no rebuilding. The people disperse, languages multiply, history continues. But the impulse remains. Every generation rediscovers the same temptation, to simplify the world, to unify meaning, to speak in one voice. Because plurality is exhausting. It requires patience, interpretation, humility. And towers promise relief. They promise a future that cannot scatter, a system so coherent it outlasts uncertainty, so efficient it no longer needs judgment. But the Babel narrative leaves a final question hanging, not about God, about us. What happens when our systems finally succeed where ancient ones failed? When language becomes perfectly optimized? When disagreement is engineered out? When coordination is no longer fragile? The story never answers this. It only suggests that some limits are not technological. They are psychological, and crossing them does not require malice, only agreement. The most unsettling possibility is this, that the danger was never the tower. It was the belief that a single structure could safely contain the future, and that the moment humanity finishes building it, there may be no voice left capable of saying that something has gone terribly wrong.